And I'm your host, Ismail Akwe, and today we are discussing the leadership gap in Africa and the role of the youth in filling this gap at the top if the laws allow them. Our guest for this discussion is Chike Ukaegbu, an educator, entrepreneur, investor, humanitarian, biomedical engineer, and Nigeria's youngest presidential candidate who joined the 2019 presidential race at just 35 years old. Welcome.
Thank you, Ismail. It's wonderful to be here.
You were brave in 2018 when you decided to run for president just after Muhammadu Buhari passed a bill that reduced the age limit for presidential aspirants from 40 to 35. Were there any major losses besides getting a little over 8,900 votes for your party, the Advanced Allied Party?
So were there any major losses?
Yeah.
That's a great question, right? It's of course what you consider a loss. And if you did not win, then yes, every other person who participated lost. However, though, for me, there were so many lessons learned that I will not necessarily consider it a loss. I learned a lot about the country, about the state of affairs with the people, which is very important to me. And of course, it was also important to show that it could be done. Once you have the right ideology, you have the right passion, and with empathy, it could be done. Africa is the most youthful continent today, but we have, I don't know if I'll be wrong to say we have some of the oldest leaders in the world. So it's important that, we as the next generation, starts to step into leadership positions. And every step that is taken towards achieving that, I consider success. So, yeah.
In the latest election in Nigeria, we didn't see you there. The election that brought to power Bola Tinubu.
Well, okay. So for different reasons. So I played a part, but behind the scenes. And I had to do that because of my work, right? I cannot be political because, my employer works in the country, right? But behind the scenes, we were still able to help where we could, push, ideologies, mobilize and organize young people to try to encourage them to participate and all that. So I did play my part. It was just not in the press like it was in 2019. Yeah.
But putting your work aside, if let's say it wasn't there, could you have had that financial muscle to go through this election? Because a lot of money was moving around. Were you really prepared, or could you have done it?
So yes, money is an extremely important part of our elections, period, anywhere, but particularly in Nigeria, right? Now, would I have done it again if I weren't at my job? No, because I thought P2B was credible. She had the same ideologies and had definitely more political experience than I did, right? At that point, it would become selfish ambition going into try to do it again if a credible candidate was there. So it was important for me to find the right person who had the ability, the financial prowess, and the empathy that Nigeria and Africa needs, basically, and throw all of my support behind them. And that was what I did.
Okay. And that means you supported Peter Obi and you campaigned for him for this election.
I supported his ideology, right?
Okay.
Like I said, because of my position at work, I couldn't publicly campaign for anyone. But it was important for me to voice what I believed was right for the country, and to encourage or empower people who were the disenfranchised or were not sure. And looking at, the ideologies, the past experiences, and credibility of the candidates, he seemed the best person. And yes, I spoke up about it.
Well, during your time, you campaigned on three pillars, which are technology, education, and entrepreneurship to build Nigeria. Are they still relevant today, looking at the changing times?
Extremely, extremely, right? So part of the reason why, I came out in 2019, I don't know if you know this about me, but I actually launched the first diversity-focused tech accelerator in New York State, maybe even in the country. And usually when we had applicants, what we realized was, Africa was quite behind, and the threat of automation, what we call the fourth industrial revolution, ravaging our continent, made it pertinent that we had credible leaders who did not just understand current problems, but can also look out into the future and come up with solutions that can prepare us for the future. Um, and for me, like I said, those three things were extremely crucial and still are. Education helps us to understand our problems, but also to come up with solutions to them. Technology helps us scale out these solutions, and entrepreneurship helps us to market them. I feel like I'm running for a campaign again. I don't want to do that, right? But, you know, also having a very youthful populace, right? Our young people are very adept when it comes to social media, right? So the growing digitization of the continent, the growing penetration of smartphones, right, is creating opportunities that we once did not have. And tapping but the appetite, the hunger, the ability of our young people and empowering them, I think is definitely something the continent still needs, but a place like Nigeria extremely is in dire need of. So yes, those three pillars I would say are still extremely important to the progress of our nation and of the continent.
Yeah, and you keep referring to the young people, bringing the young people up so they could be part of the decision making and also leadership. However, you were quite lucky, I would say, to be able to vie for presidency at 35. Right now, I'm sure a lot of the young leaders we have may not be able to push through when it comes to any of such leadership roles. Do you think there should be more done to allow younger people to be able to join in such, race and such ambitions of becoming leaders like presidents in African countries?
Well, of course, the apparent answer to that is yes. But let me be clear, when I talk about young people, right? Not just any young, we need credible young people. That's extremely important.
Okay.
Because you could have young leaders with the same mindset of rulers that have derailed the future of the continent and will be in more trouble, right? Just like you have, older people who are still in touch, but with empathy and the right leadership skills to lead the continent, right? However, yes, we need to do a lot more to empower the younger generation or the next generation. And when I say young, I mean, I'm 40 now. So in politics, 40 could still be young. But in reality, we have people who are, Gen Zs and younger, who are also upcoming. So as we clamor and fight for the voice of the young person to be heard, it's important for our generation to understand that there are also people behind us and start now to groom them for that. One of the things I talked about in terms of failure or our failure to incorporate young minds in decision making is the fact that the older generation did not have a transition mechanism, right, or system to groom people who are credible and capable of leadership, right? Now, since we have been able to identify that problem, it is important that we don't pass on that problem to the next generation, right? So as we clamor for, the involvement of more young people in politics, is also important that we start now to raise and groom the next generation so that even if we don't get there, we have people behind who are qualified and credible enough to step into those positions and succeed.
You represent diaspora Nigerians and you see things from New York, where you're based. What do you see as the current problems in Nigeria? Because the current president says, well, he has a plan and things will change, but a lot of people do not believe that there will be any change. And already there are complaints about expenditure. There was a complaint about a presidential yacht, which I mean, it costs a lot of money while a lot of Nigerians are having health crisis. What do you see as the main problems right now in Nigeria?
It's a lack of a vision, right? And it's not just in Nigeria, right? If you look at some of the African countries, in my opinion, that are doing well or that are beginning to strive, they have leaders with a vision, right? And when I talk about vision, I don't mean, oh, let's just build roads or let's, feed the hungry. Those are important. But if you're building roads for 200 million people today, for a nation that its population might double in another 3 decades, it means that, 20 years from now, you have created another problem because you still have overpopulation, right? But people who can look into the future, tap into data, tap into our history and say, okay, in order for us to succeed for our generation and for posterity, this is the outlook that we need to take in solving our problems, right? And we don't have that, right? Like I said, I always talk about young people in leadership. There are older people who have the right mindset. Like just like I said previously, I would support P2B because not only does he have the experience, he was a former governor, not only has he run successful businesses, right? There's the empathy there, and there is that vision that captures the importance of posterity. And that's important to me, right? I want my children to have a better world than I have today. And it's important that I do everything that I can to make sure that that happens. So the main problem we have in Nigeria is it's not having leaders who understand a vision that can carry the nation beyond now. One, and then leaders that understand the importance of empathy in leadership, right? We have a Congress that is buying cars for itself, for themselves. You have a president who is doing whatever. We already talked about some of those expenditures. Meanwhile, there are people Nigeria has about, if not still, the largest population of people who live in extreme poverty. What are you doing to solve that problem? What are you doing to lift people up out of poverty into, economic situations that can help them put food on the table, not just for themselves, but also for the people who depend on them? And those are the things that we are not seeing. It's like we have tone deaf leaders who don't care about the masses when the two basic responsibilities of governance is to provide and to protect the people or create the environment that enables them to do that safely, and as that yet, we're yet to see that.
Well, the people of Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and even Gabon were complaining about the same things. And then we saw young military leaders taking over and overthrowing these governments. Do you think their actions were worth it?
Okay, so Francophone Africa has a rich history that the rest of Africa has not actually um, adequately delved into. And partly because our educational system, especially I can speak of Nigeria, does not prioritize history of the country, not to talk of the continent, right? As a Nigerian, I can say, based on what I know about my country, based on what I know, the people I know in the country are going through, what solutions I think is best for Nigerians.